MobLand, a criminal drama that airs on Paramount Plus, has produced a great deal of paranoia-fueled intrigue in the course of the escalation of the battle between the Harrigans and the Stevensons. However, Episode 8 revealed that one of the Harrigans has been linked with Richie Stevenson from the very beginning of the show. In an effort to obtain additional information regarding the fentanyl operation that the Stevensons were conducting for Conrad, Harry conned Richie's henchman Freddie into divulging a significant piece of information. Freddie disclosed that one of the Harrigans had been working with Richie during the entire undertaking. It was never Archie Hammond who was brought to his death in the first episode of MobLand for what was believed to be a betrayal. The audience is not yet aware of which member of the Harrigan crime organization has been trying to undercut Conrad's move on fentanyl, since Freddie revealed the information off-screen and was swiftly slain after it was disclosed. Freddie's death occurred shortly after the information was publicly disclosed. However, there are a few essential characters that we are able to remove based on the context clues that we have and the acts that they have taken in the program up to this point. Despite the fact that there are a number of candidates who are still possibilities, the action that has taken place up to this point leads towards a certain character, whose betrayal really makes a great deal of sense when viewed in the context of the bigger picture. There are a great number of important persons who have been wronged by Conrad Harrigan, and the fact that they have been wronged is sufficient motive for them to form an alliance with Richie Stevenson and hasten the process of his ultimate demise. As an illustration, Bella Harrigan, who is now married to Kevin, had a romantic relationship with Conrad when she was still a very young woman. It is reasonable to believe that their connection was not entirely voluntary, given the circumstances surrounding Conrad's position at the time. In the 8th episode of MobLand, he was quick to tell her that there are no secrets between them, and her dislike and disdain are as obvious as the sun shining. The schedule for the remaining episodes of MobLand release date for the episode, title of the episode Sunday, May 25th, Beggar's Banquet, number 9. This Sunday, June 1st, The Beast in Me will be 10. Mave had been wronged by Conrad for what seems like decades, and as a proud Irish matriarch, it is not out of the realm of possibilities that she would be linked with his opponent. Conrad is a serial adulterer. As a matter of fact, we have already witnessed her working along with Richie to murder Serafina, who is Conrad's cherished daughter. In another part of the story, O'Hara Delaney, the lawyer for the Harrigan family, played by Lisa Dwan, is not without suspicion. She is aware of all the secrets that the Harrigans keep, and she was the one who brought to light the notion that the Harrigans may have a rat in their family. That is an excellent place to begin in order to get her to throw off the scent altogether. Harry da Souza is one of the more intriguing prospects because he is obviously of the highest level of intelligence and appears to be 2 steps ahead of everyone he comes into contact with. Observing Conrad in his natural state has the potential to serve as sufficient motivation for him to start working with Richie. This is especially true if Harry had the perception that his wife and daughter were not safe when they were in the presence of Conrad, which is accurate. Up until this point, he has given the impression of being absolutely faithful. Nevertheless, it is debatable whether this is a genuine act or a carefully designed deceit. Obviously, it is reasonable to rule out Conrad, and considering that Eddie was the one who killed his son on Mave's orders, the likelihood of Eddie having any kind of relationship with Richie Stevenson is quite low. On the basis of all that we have seen up to this point, Jan's narrative with Alice demonstrates that she does not possess the cunning to pull off a long-form treachery and deception, which consequently makes it quite safe to rule out the possibility of her being involved. To be honest, Serafina is completely devoted to her father and does not have any genuine reasons to betray him. Furthermore, considering that Richie came dangerously close to killing her, she does not appear to be a viable option. On the basis of their interactions, it is very evident that Kevin Harrigan does not have any feelings of affection for his father, and he has feelings that are on the verge of being open hatred for his mother. He could have a good reason to wish for their destruction, but he would also not be exempt from Richie's anger because he is thought to be the next in line to the throne of the Harrigans. To assume that Kevin would be collaborating with Richie to make a move against his father is a step too far, despite the fact that Kevin's anger was warranted in response to his son's death of Richie's son, Tommy. Starting all the way back in the first episode of MobLand, when Conrad was responsible for the murder of his friend Archie Hammond, Mave has been the mastermind behind virtually every action that has harmed Conrad's position or his stability. She's already demonstrated that she is willing to put her own cherished son's life in danger if it means causing serious harm to Conrad by removing his daughter from him for good. That amount of pride and hatred cannot be reasoned with, and it is completely logical to imagine that Mave would cooperate with her husband's opponent if it meant payback for his decades of infidelity. Mave's spouse has been unfaithful to her repeatedly. The conclusion of the first season of MobLand should, ideally, finally expose who has been working to undermine the Harrigans from within, although all of the evidence points to Mave being the person responsible for this attempt. The fact that Mave and Richie have a history has been brought up on several occasions, hence, it is probable that her treachery has been simmering for some time now. Richie made the decision not to make it known to Conrad that Mave was the one responsible for the kidnapping of Brendan and Serafina, as well as the death or near murder of both of them. This decision would make a great deal of sense if Richie was still of greater value to him as a mole. The conclusion of the first season of MobLand should, ideally, finally expose who has been working to undermine the Harrigans from within, although all of the evidence points to Mave being the person responsible for this attempt. In terms of the families that appear on film, the Harrigans from MobLand have got to be among the most dysfunctional, toxic, and incestuous families that we have seen in a considerable amount of time. Eddie's Ansem Boone psychopathic murder of Richie Stevenson's, Jeff Bell's son, Tommy Felix Edwards, is the act of irrational aggression that began this unnecessary bloodbath that has now taken the lives of the most innocent members of each family. Ron Stevenson, Annie Cooper, and Brendan Harrigan, Daniel Betts. Already, we have seen Conrad's Pierce Brosnan, ruthlessness and sexual deviant behavior, and Eddie's Ansem Boone, killing of Richie Stevenson's, Jeff Bell's son, Tommy Felix Edwards. Nevertheless, despite the fact that the most recent episode, titled Helter Skelter, primarily concentrated on the potential repercussions that could result from Harry's Tom Hardy agreement with Kat McAllister, Janet McTeer, there was a particular sentence that stood out due to the alarming implications it had regarding the ancestry of a certain member of the Harrigans. Not a single item will remain the same in the event that it is shown to be the truth, as it appears that it will surely be. There would be an irreversible shift in the power structure, as well as our sympathy for this character, which would provide some background that is really important to their conduct. But for the time being, MobLand has us wondering who the hell Eddie Harrigan's real parents are. There are a lot of things about this prospective reveal that still need to be explained. Following the horrible death of Brendan in episode 7, The Crossroads, Mave was unexpectedly distraught and full of sadness, even welcomed Serafina, Mandeep Dhillon, back with wide arms and dubbing her a true Harrigan. She does, however, expose her actual nature in a conversation that she has later in the episode with Kevin, who is played by Paddy Considine. In an effort to turn Kevin against Serafina, Mave tells him that the only heirs to the Harrigan Empire will be Kevin or your brother. She also refers to Serafina as a base-born bastard. When Kevin tries to shut this down by reminding Mave that Brendan is dead, Mave clarifies that she means your other brother, in a tone that is filled with ominousness. In light of the fact that Kevin reacts so strongly to this, calling his own mother a bitch, before Eddie enters the room, it seems possible that Mave was sharing the information that Eddie is not Kevin's son. On the other hand, it is not entirely obvious how exactly he is connected to Kevin. If Kevin was unaware of this information until now, it could imply that Conrad continued his relationship with Bella, Lara Pulver, in secret despite the fact that she was married to Kevin and that Bella was carrying Conrad's child rather than Kevin's child. In light of the intense reaction and Kevin's instantaneous assumption that Mave meant Brendan, it is likely that this is the case. On the other hand, there is a whole different scenario that may be even more concerning for everyone who is connected to the Harrigan family's family. In light of the fact that Eddie is not only Mave's kid, but also Mave's son with Richie, in other words. However, this would not be the first time that Bella and Kevin have turned a blind eye to horrifying things. And while it would have been impossible for Mave to conceal the truth, it is possible that Conrad is aware of himself. This would imply that the true parentage of Eddie is a confidential matter between Kevin, Bella, and Mave. The fact that Mave mentioned how close she and Richie used to be, even to the point of being too close, is the most compelling evidence in support of this theory. Eddie was the only one in the room who was able to hear Mave's statement, and it is possible that Mave was hinting something at that precise moment. To add insult to injury, Mave does not show any concern for Serafina, who is Conrad's kid with another woman. If Eddie is not genuinely her son, then it is difficult to understand why she would feel such a strong maternal attachment to him. The repercussions could be extremely significant in the event that this revelation is proven. When emotions are already at an all-time high, this has the potential to further exacerbate the situation inside the Harrigan family. As a result of Kevin's loss of faith in his family, Harry might be able to escape Conrad's control and become independent of him. This is because Harry would no longer be without assistance. On the other hand, if Mave is successful in manipulating Conrad to favor Eddie over Kevin, particularly in light of the fact that there is a suspicion that there is a rat in the family and Kevin is adamant about remaining by the side of his family, the bloodthirsty nature of Eddie and Mave would put anyone who isn't completely loyal to them in danger. This revelation comes at the worst possible time for someone who is already dealing through enough psychosexual troubles as it is, with Kevin's trauma stemming from the sexual assault he endured as a young boy while he was incarcerated. Conrad or Richie could be Eddie's father, as was suggested earlier. Eddie's real father could be either of them. In any case, it contributes significantly to the development of our understanding of Eddie's personality. The fact that Eddie's behavior may be traced back to Conrad's natural hostility would be established if Conrad was the father. Due to the fact that this was unavoidable, it would make Eddie's murder of Tommy appear to be a great deal more of a symptom of a human being who has lost all hope for a better life. The fact that he is Richie's son, on the other hand, would result in a significant dramatic irony and a tragedy surrounding Tommy's passing, which would result in a great deal more sympathy for Eddie. Eddie would have killed his half-brother, and he would have been utterly misled into doing it. This would have been in contrast to killing someone who was a family rival, on the other hand. This comes at a time when he is already embarking on a trip in which he is being put down by Harry and everyone else around him, and he is getting less confident as the season progresses. It is possible that by the time this season is over, this terrifying young guy will have encountered a great deal of internal strife. The fact that all of this is coming from a single statement does not change the fact that it has the ability to have an impact on the tales of numerous characters, which may make it one of the most crucial moments of the whole season. Every single thing that Mave, Conrad, Eddie, Kevin, and everyone else thought they knew about what Mave meant will be completely altered after the final revelation of what Mave meant. In particular for Eddie, if he discovers that virtually his entire life has been a deception, he will be forced to choose between supporting his biological parents or the man whom he is referred to as his father throughout his entire existence. MobLand is a show that is both brutal and amusing, yet it is somewhat unjust that Guy Ritchie is receiving all of the credit for the show's magnificence, in spite of the fact that he only helmed the first 2 episodes. Ronan Bennett, the author of The Day of the Jack and Top Boy, is also the creator of the series and the person responsible for writing it. In the episode, Pierce Brosnan plays the role of Conrad Harrigan, the head of the London crime syndicate, while Helen Mirren plays Mave Harrigan, the matriarch of the Harrigan family. The role of Harry, a fixer for the Harrigans who does his best to prevent a mob conflict from growing further, is played by Tom Hardy. A number of shocking events take place throughout the course of the episode, such as Conrad shooting a person who is suspected of betraying the family in front of everyone else, and the wife of a rival mob boss being killed by a car bomb. It is not surprising that it has been such a great success for Paramount Plus. As a matter of fact, it is not the most bizarre television series that Tom Hardy has ever starred in. The actor, who is well known for his passion for the criminal genre, has been in a number of movies that have received positive reviews, including Peaky Blinders, in which he has played gangsters. However, The Take stands out as one of his most bizarre presentations, if not the most bizarre of any of his shows. Has incarceration ever been beneficial to a hardcore gangster? The Take begins with Tom Hardy's character, Freddie Jackson, a psychopathic and occasionally charismatic criminal, walking out of prison in the first few minutes of the feature film. He has just completed a period of 4 years in which he did not sing, and he is now prepared to face the world once more. Doing a respectable job? Number. It is not enough for Freddie to merely restore his position as a lackey in the East End's organized criminal scene. He wants to reclaim his place. In his imagination, he sees himself as a figure comparable to Billy Hill or Freddie Foreman, as huge as he possibly can be. In this way, he embarks on a road that leads him to ascend the ranks of the criminal hierarchy, which is characterized by a pattern of violence and manipulation. During this time, he takes pleasure in the most delightful aspects that life has to offer, whether it be slender women or parties with martinis. Before we are thrown headfirst into a high adrenaline world of unrelenting mayhem, the first few episodes do an excellent job of establishing the background and introducing to us the primary characters in the show. Freddie's younger cousin Jimmy, played by Sean Evans, is one of the individuals that we come across. Jimmy has the intention of using Freddie to establish himself as a prominent figure in the criminal underground. It is interesting to note that he is associated with Maggie, played by Charlotte Riley, who is the sister of Jackie, played by Kirsten Waring, who is Freddie's wife. On the other hand, given Freddie's unstable behavior, he quickly finds himself split between his family and his criminal activities. As Freddie's criminal empire expands, he becomes increasingly unable to control his urges, which in turn causes him to become more aggressive and abusive. While Freddie is incarcerated, his mentor, Ozzy, the crime lord, who is played by Brian Cox, watches as his protege dances between fire and water. The usage of drugs and Freddie's worry about his adversaries only serve to make his behavior even more problematic. Jackie eventually comes to the realization that she no longer has faith in him and begins to look for ways to break free from her monotonous and routine life as a mob bride. Although she does not possess a higher moral character, it is more difficult to criticize her conduct outright, since we are aware that she's a victim who is ensnared in the marriage setting. Freddie's out-of-control behavior leads to the emergence of betrayals and rivalries, which ultimately end in disastrous consequences. Now is the time for Jimmy to make a decision. He may either follow in Freddie's footsteps or establish his own path. We are accustomed to seeing Tom Hardy portraying gangsters who are not very nice, but he rarely goes into full lunatic mode like he does in this film. As an alternative to, for example, nailing someone to the cross like Archie from Peaky Blinders might do, Freddie abuses his wife, slashes his necks, and terrorizes his relatives. However, if it weren't for all of the bad deeds that he does, the program wouldn't be nearly as appealing as it is now. Watching him do all of these things is extremely difficult. The Take takes the typical components of the genre, such as tough guys, malls, and awesome bosses, places them in a car, forces them to accelerate away, and then gives them a jolt of knuckle-duster realism that causes them to tremble. At the time of its debut, it was met with severe criticism for its extremely graphic picture of the underworld, and it was even labeled as sadistic. However, the things that it highlights have since become standard in crime thrillers, from both the United States of America and the United Kingdom. In a sense, the show is a precursor to the much more gritty and brutal crime shows that would emerge in the 2010s. The fact that the showrunner of the criminal thriller, Neil Biswas, who is better renowned for his work on Stan Lee's Lucky Man, is able to transmit a mirage of substance in situations when it is scarcely existent is another thing that deserves to be acknowledged. Imagine Freddie as the character Tommy DeVito from the film Goodfellas, even more impressive in the role of Ralph Cifaretto from The Sopranos. In comparison to his contemporaries, he is a dreadful human being, despite the fact that he is a high earner and is rather skilled at navigating the criminal underground. Ralph is a person who does not respect anyone and takes joy in causing harm to others. Do you recall the time when he went and killed Tracy outside of the Bada Bing? The savagery that Freddy displays is so extreme that it will make you cry. Freddy does something very similar. MobLand, on the other hand, never gets to either of these extremes. It is also a compendium of genre cliches, with formulaic hoodlums acting exactly as we would anticipate, and a primary arc trigger, mob son stabs other mob son, that is so brazenly common that it feels like a terrible joke. Admittedly, it is hardly a failure to amaze with its stylish action set pieces, but in reality, it is just a compendium of genre cliches. Hardy is seen as a decent enforcer in it. Every other character in the story is violent, but none of them can compare to Freddy from The Take. In the debut of the new series on Paramount Plus, Eddie appeared to be on the verge of going in this direction when he committed the stabbing. However, he has now been reduced to the status of a spoilt brat who does nothing but listen to family meetings and let others clean up his mess. There are two types of followers of Tom Hardy: those who adore him because he is a handsome and charismatic man, and those who adore the way that he thoroughly immerses himself in roles whenever he is given the opportunity to do so. Those who are fans of Hardy the actor should consider The Take, rather than MobLand, as their preferred option. The latter portrays Hardy as nothing more than a rough guy. "Get your hands off me," he tells an invigilator who is attempting to prevent him from removing his daughter from an examination room when the mob battle begins. "Get these hands off of me." It's hardly the first time we've heard those words, is it? The majority of the time, Hardy is most successful when he is playing characters who are a little bit loose in their actions. Bane from The Dark Knight Rises or Al Capone from Capone are two examples that come to mind. The character Alfie from Peaky Blinders is in the similar situation as well. This is the reason why he favors administering punishments in the biblical form. Charles Bronson, the son of Bronson, should not be forgotten. You won't be able to fully appreciate Hardy's abilities if you give him a character who isn't insane or emotional. Everything is there for us to experience in The Take, including the accent, the voice that may alter, the energy, the captivating presence, and the emotional range. When Freddy is slipping off the rails, we believe it, just as we did when we watched Hardy in Capone playing the role of an aging and weak Al Capone. We are also of the opinion that he is truly evil while he is conducting some of the most horrific deeds of his life. They do not take us by surprise. Rather, they merely cause us to be disturbed. Although we are concerned about Freddy's well-being in the event that he enters a state of psychosis in which he consumes pills and prays that someone would be able to rescue him from the verge of insanity, there is a part of us that wishes it could last a little bit longer simply because Hardy is performing so beautifully. To make matters even better, Hardy is not overshadowed. Charlotte Riley and Brian Cox are examples of people who exist to complement him rather than to compete with him in The Take, which is his particular area. Unfortunately, the Englishman is not even close to being the best actor in MobLand. This is primarily due to the fact that his role is the typical type, and there are also more seasoned performers included in the cast. Helen Mirren is so captivating that it is difficult to take your eyes off of her, and Pierce Brosnan is absolutely wonderful whenever he goes from being calm to enraged. On the other hand, Hardy functions on the same wavelength regardless of the scene where he is present. In recognition of his work on The Take, Hardy was nominated for the RTS Television Award in the category of Best Actor. However, the show was not included in the British Academy of Film and Television Arts Awards, BAFTAs, which was just as perplexing as its absence from the International Emmy Awards. This demonstrates that perhaps the time had come for award committees to reconsider their acceptance criteria. The 8th episode of MobLand, which is available on Paramount Plus, continues to build up to its climatic conclusion, and it does not disappoint. The gangland power dynamic undergoes a significant transformation as a result of this addition, particularly in light of Richie Stevenson's horrific double murder. Through the escalation of tensions and the revelation of secrets, this episode prepares the audience for a fierce confrontation in the final episode. During the sit-down discussion, Richie demonstrates his authority by shooting DS Fisk and DC Mukasa. This occurs after they had committed an offense to him during the process of a proposed partnership. The two detectives are put to death by Richie Stevenson, who declares, no one owns Richie Stevenson." This occurs after Mukasa asserts that Richie will never own them, and Fisk supports her position. Despite the fact that their remarks were hostile, the true underlying motivation for the killings is much more profound. As a result of their unyielding posture, the detectives were not acceptable allies. As Richie came to the realization that they would not ignore his aggressive desires, he realized that they would become liabilities. The elimination of interference and the opening for Richie to collaborate directly with Colin Tattersall, who is more flexible, are both made possible by their deaths. The appearance of Toby Jones, who plays the role of Colin Tattersall, a former deputy chief inspector, indicates a significant shift in their relationship. In the aftermath of the murder, Tattersall instantly intervenes, displaying neither astonishment nor opposition. The fact that he and Richie have a history that dates back to 1975 indicates that their connection is likely to be convoluted and possibly corrupt. Earlier, Tattersall explains to DS Fisk and DC Mukasa that in order to bring down a criminal family, you need to form an alliance with the family's adversary. Because Tattersall is now effectively supervising the alliance, Richie is able to acquire access to law enforcement resources that he has never had before, which guarantees that his operations will be completely protected. This cooperation is a significant factor that tilts the scales in the Harrigan's favor. Given that Harry is now indebted to Cat McAllister for 2 favors, the presence of the mysterious Cat McAllister becomes even more ominous. In a foreboding warning, Conrad states that a man thinks twice before picking up the phone to Cat McAllister. Within the context of a crucial transaction involving fentanyl and multinational cartels, Cat is able to secure 50% of the earnings only for the sake of brokering a meeting. This demonstrates that she is a significant power broker in the criminal society of the world. The extent of her influence cannot be questioned, regardless of whether she is a member of a criminal organization or a covert government organization. It is clear that she places a high value on Harry's abilities, as she has previously signaled her desire for him to work for her. It is possible that the Harrigans will be betrayed, assassinated, or infiltrated in order to obtain the favors that are currently waiting. Regardless of what they are, it is certain that they are going to be risky, illegal, and involve large risks. Richie's right-hand man, Freddie, had been under Harry's control because of images that were considered to be highly inappropriate. In the 8th episode, Harry uses his considerable influence on Freddie to coerce him into divulging information about Richie's fentanyl business, and more crucially, the identity of the member of the Harrigan family who is working with Richie. After Harry has obtained the intelligence, he pushes Freddie over a building, so removing a potential snag in the story. In spite of the fact that the name of the mole is not disclosed on screen, the context strongly suggests that Mave Harrigan is the culprit. The fact that she had already called Richie and disclosed the whereabouts of Brendan and Serafina appeared to be risky unless she was already working with him. This idea is supported by the fact that she has retained her survival and remained to be a member of the family despite making numerous strategic errors. Mave's mention of Kevin's other brother elicits a violent response from Kevin, which shows that there are hidden dynamics within the family. Eddie, whose appearance and Mave's pointed stare hint to a deeper truth, interrupts them. Mave continues to seem suspicious. This revelation could place Eddie as another heir to the Harrigan Empire, which could potentially ignite further internal turmoil. It looks that Eddie might be Conrad's son with Bella, rather than Kevin's son. This would make Eddie the literal other brother. Kevin's pursuit for Rusby, a former jail guard, is driven by a personal grudge that he wanted to exact against him. During Kevin's time spent in prison as a teenager, it is revealed that Rusby sexually assaulted him. The interaction that Kevin has with Rusby's wife, who is suffering from dementia, demonstrates his desperation. Based on the circumstances and Kevin's demeanor, it is clear that he is not looking for resolution. Rather, he is seeking revenge. He appears to have the intention of killing Rusby in order to settle an old score in a cruel manner that is consistent with the themes of vengeance and trauma that are explored in the episode.